3 shots of top-shelf scotch. That was Tamsin's first mistake. Her second? Stumbling into the wrong hotel suite. She expected her economy room. Instead, she walked straight into the Alpha's den. Ronan Gallagher is shirtless, sweating, and fighting a pre-moon fever that makes him lethal to everyone. Except her. She treats him like a waiter. He looks at her like salvation. But when rival enforcers swarm the hallway, Tamsin tries to flee, only to hear the deadbolt slide home. She thinks she's trapped with a monster, until he backs her against the door, eyes glowing gold, and growls the 3 words that seal her fate. "You're safe here." She didn't just walk into the wrong room, she walked into a mate bond. Welcome home to Atlena's Romantasy collection. To my loyal pack members, it's great to have you back, and if you're new here, get comfortable. You're in for a wild ride. If you're ready for the Alpha, please like this video, share it with a friend, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. I want to see how far our pack reaches. Drop a comment below and tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Let's jump into the story. Chapter 1. The Scotch and the Mistake. 3 scotches had been a tactical error. Tamsin Greer knew this as soon as the elevator floor lurched beneath her boots, sending a wave of nausea rolling through her stomach. She leaned her forehead against the cool, brushed steel of the elevator wall. "Hold it together, Greer," she muttered to herself. "You restore 1920s speakeasy bars for a living. You can handle a little top-shelf whiskey." She could handle the whiskey. What she couldn't handle was seeing Brett in the lobby of the Gilded Oak Hotel, wearing that same slimy sharkskin suit and laughing with a group of investors as if he hadn't destroyed her credit score 6 months ago. The sight of him had sent her straight to the bar, and 3 rapid-fire drinks later, here she was, escaping to her room before she did something liable to void her vendor contract, like hitting him with a tire iron. A sharp scratch at her hip made her jump. "Quit it!" she hissed, patting the front pocket of her oversized Carhartt hoodie. "I know you're mad. I'm mad too, but we can't bite people in the lobby, Stash. It's bad for business." Stash, her eastern gray squirrel and primary confidant, let out a muffled chitter of disapproval from the depths of her pocket. He hated travel. He hated hotels. And, judging by the sharp nip he'd just given her thumb, he currently hated her. The elevator dinged. Tamsin pushed off the wall, squinting at the panel. She needed the 7th floor. Room 702. She jabbed a button that looked roughly correct, her vision slightly swimming, and waited for the doors to slide open. When they did, the hallway didn't look like the economy wing she'd booked. The carpet was thicker, plush enough to swallow the sound of her heavy work boots. The sconces on the wall weren't generic industrial lights, they were actual crystal. "Fancy," Tamsin mumbled, stumbling slightly as she stepped out. She checked the number on the nearest door. No number. Just a long, silent corridor leading to a set of massive double doors at the end. 702, she whispered, marching toward the end of the hall. 702. That's the one. She reached the double doors. There was no number plate, but there was a card reader. She fumbled for her keycard, nearly dropping it twice. Stash shifted in her pocket, his tiny claws digging into her stomach through her t-shirt. "I'm trying, you rodent," she grumbled. She shoved the plastic card into the slot. It flashed red. "Oh, come on." She jammed it in again. Red. "Don't do this to me. I just want to take off these overalls and eat the minibar peanuts." She wiggled the card aggressively, applying the same percussive maintenance she used on stuck drawers in her workshop. Suddenly, the lock mechanism clicked. A wet, mechanical crunch that sounded less like access granted and more like critical failure. The heavy door swung inward with a groan. "Nailed it," Tamsin declared triumphantly. She stepped inside, tripping over the threshold and stumbling onto a Persian rug that probably cost more than her Jeep. The room was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the Chicago skyline filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. It smelled intense. Not like hotel cleaner or stale air conditioning, it smelled like a thunderstorm about to break. Ozone, cedar, and a heavy, rolling heat that hit her in the face like a physical wall. "Room service?" a voice rumbled. It wasn't a question. It was a low, vibrating sound that seemed to come from the floorboards. Tamsin blinked, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. Standing near the window was a silhouette. A massive silhouette. The man was shirtless, his skin slick with sweat, his shoulders broad enough to block out the view of the Willis Tower. He was pacing, his movements jerky and agitated, like an engine running too hot. Tamsin squinted. "I didn't order room service," she slurred, digging into her pocket for her wallet. "But since you're here, fetch me some water, and maybe some aspirin." The giant froze. He turned slowly, and even in the dark, Tamsin saw the glint of his eyes. They weren't friendly. They looked like a storm front moving in fast. Chapter 2. The Lockdown. Ronan Gallagher was holding on to his humanity by a fraying thread. The full moon was 48 hours away, and his wolf was already clawing at the inside of his skull, demanding to be let out. His bones ached with the pressure of the shift, a deep, grinding pain that felt like his marrow was boiling. He had retreated to the penthouse, his territory, his fortress, to ride out the pre-moon fever in isolation. Then the door had opened. He spun around, a snarl rising in his throat, ready to tear apart whatever security guard had been foolish enough to ignore the "do not disturb" order. Instead, a woman stumbled in. She was tiny, a swirl of messy brown hair, paint-stained denim overalls that were 3 sizes too big, and a gray hoodie that looked like it had seen a war zone. She swayed slightly on her feet, smelling of cheap scotch, sawdust, and lemon polish. And underneath that? Mate. The scent hit Ronan like a sledgehammer to the chest. It was sweet, sharp, and undeniable. His wolf slammed against the cage of his control, howling, "Mine! Mine! Safe! Mine!" Ronan took a staggering step back, gripping the back of a velvet armchair until the wood creaked warningly. "Get out," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "Don't be rude," the woman mumbled, swaying. She pulled a crumpled $5 bill from her pocket and waved it at him. "Here, tip, water, now." Ronan stared at her. She thought he was a waiter. She was drunk, she was small, and she was standing in the middle of a predator's den while he was actively fighting a biological urge to violence. Then he smelled it. Layered under the scent of his mate and the scotch was something else wafting in from the open hallway. Stale tobacco, gun oil, cheap cologne. Vargas. The rival pack's enforcers were on the floor. They must have followed him from the lobby, tracking his heat signature. If they saw this woman, if they smelled her scent mixed with his, she would be leverage before sunrise. Logic snapped back into place, overriding the pain. He couldn't send her out there. Ronan moved. He didn't run, he blurred. He crossed the room in 2 strides, slamming the heavy double doors shut and throwing the manual deadbolt with a force that rattled the frame. The woman jumped, dropping the $5 bill. "Hey! What's your problem, big guy?" Ronan leaned his forehead against the door, breathing heavily, trying to filter the scents. He could hear heavy footsteps near the elevator. They were pausing, sniffing. "You're staying," Ronan growled, not turning around. "Don't move." "Excuse me?" Tamsin planted her hands on her hips, her fear dampened by the alcohol. "I am not staying anywhere with a guy who locks doors like a serial killer. Open it! I have a squirrel, and I'm not afraid to use him." Ronan turned slowly. His skin was burning up, sweat dripping down his chest. His eyes, usually a stormy gray, were flashing with flecks of molten gold. "You are safe here," he said, the command layering into his voice, a subsonic vibration meant to soothe a pack member. "You are not safe out there." "I'm not safe with you," she snapped. She marched up to him, fearless, foolish creature, and poked him hard in the center of his chest. "Open the door." The contact seared him. His control slipped. He looked down at her finger on his sternum, his breath hitching. Suddenly, the front pocket of her hoodie wriggled. A gray blur shot out like a fuzzy missile. Chomp! Ronan looked down. A squirrel, wearing a tiny denim vest, was currently sinking its teeth into his thumb. Ronan didn't flinch. He just stared at the rodent hanging off his hand. The squirrel stared back with black, hate-filled eyes. "Stash!" the woman shrieked, grabbing the animal. "Drop it! We don't eat the help!" Chapter 3. Room Service and Resistance. "He bit you," Tamsin said, horrified, wrestling Stash back into her pocket while the squirrel chattered a string of rodent profanities. "Oh my God! Do you need a shot? Do you have rabies? Wait, do I have rabies?" Ronan looked at his thumb. There were 2 small puncture marks. They were already closing. The sting helped ground him, sharpening his focus through the haze of the moon fever. "I don't have rabies," Ronan said, his voice tight. He stepped away from the door, putting distance between them. Every instinct he had screamed to wrap her up in the duvet and stand guard over the bed, but he couldn't touch her. Not like this, not when his claws were itching to tear through his skin. "Okay, look," Tamsin said, brushing hair out of her eyes. She looked around the room, finally processing the size of it. "This isn't room 702, is it? This is the penthouse." "It is suite 702, Ronan corrected, moving to the window to check the reflection. "Just the only room on the floor." "Right, okay." Tamsin swayed, grabbing the back of a sofa to steady herself. "I made a mistake. I'll just go. You can keep the $5 for the emotional distress." She took a step toward the door. Ronan was there instantly, blocking her path. He didn't touch her. He kept his hands raised, palms open, but his sheer size was a barricade. He was 6'4" of agitated muscle, and in the dim light, he looked terrifying. "You can't leave," he said. "Is this a kidnapping?" Tamsin asked, her hazel eyes narrowing. "Because I have to warn you, my Jeep is a piece of junk, and I have negative $40 in my bank account. You'd be losing money on the ransom." "It's not a kidnapping," Ronan gritted out. He could hear the Vargas enforcers moving down the hall now. They were right outside. If she opened that door, the scent of mate would hit them, and the treaty would be broken in blood. "It's a security issue. The hallway is compromised." "Compromised? Like wet paint?" "Sure," Ronan lied. "Toxic fumes. Very dangerous." Tamsin blinked at him. "You are a terrible liar. You're sweating like you're running a marathon. You're shirtless, and you're guarding the door like a bouncer. Are you hiding a dead body in here?" "No." "Are you planning to hide a dead body in here?" "Sit down," Ronan commanded, the alpha timber slipping into his voice again. "Drink some water. Sleep. You leave in the morning." Tamsin opened her mouth to argue, but the adrenaline crash hit her all at once. The scotch, the stress, and the warmth of the room conspired against her. Her knees buckled. Ronan caught her arm to steady her, just a brush of his fingers, and the spark was electric. He pulled back as if burned. "Bed." He pointed to the massive king-sized mattress in the center of the room. "Sleep." "Fine," Tamsin mumbled, stumbling toward it. She kicked off her heavy work boots, leaving them in the middle of the floor. She didn't bother with the covers. She just face-planted onto the duvet, fully clothed in her overalls. "But if you murder me, I'm haunting this hotel, and Stash will eat your eyes." 30 seconds later, she was snoring, soft, light puffs of air. Ronan didn't sleep. He dragged a heavy armchair to face the door. He sat down, gripping the armrests until the leather groaned, his eyes glowing gold in the dark, listening to the heavy footsteps pacing outside his door, waiting for the sun to rise. Chapter 4. The Morning Glare. Tamsin woke up with a headache that felt like someone was taking a belt sander to her frontal lobe. She groaned, peeling her face off a pillowcase that had a thread count higher than her annual income. The room was bright, too bright. Sunlight streamed through massive windows, illuminating a space that was definitely not the economy single she had booked. Memory rushed back. The elevator, the wrong button, the giant. "Oh no," she whispered into the mattress. Please tell me I didn't pass out in a stranger's penthouse. She rolled over. She had. Across the room, standing at a sleek kitchenette island, was the giant. He was dressed now, thank God, in dark jeans and a black t-shirt that strained across his shoulders. He was cooking. The smell of bacon and eggs wafted through the air, making Tamsin's stomach turn over, half in hunger, half in nausea. He was eating directly out of the pan. He shoveled a forkful of eggs into his mouth with a mechanical efficiency that was slightly disturbing. There had to be a dozen eggs in there. Tamsin sat up. "You eat like a python," she croaked. Ronan froze. He turned slowly. In the daylight, he was even more intimidating. Dark auburn hair shaved close at the sides, a thick beard, and eyes that were the color of a winter storm. He looked tired. He looked irritated. "You're awake," he said flatly. "Eat, then leave." "Good morning to you too, sunshine," Tamsin muttered, sliding off the bed. She checked her pocket. Stash was curled up in a ball of lint, asleep. "Look, about last night, I was overserved. I'm sorry for the intrusion." Ronan turned back to his eggs. "The door is unlocked now." He was cold, dismissive. Last night he had been intense, bordering on obsessive about keeping her safe. Now he wouldn't even look at her. Tamsin's defenses snapped into place. She grabbed her boots, hopping on one foot to jam them on. "Right, well, thanks for not murdering me. I'll just be going." She stomped toward the door. As she passed him, Ronan moved. He stepped into her path, blocking her exit again. He didn't look at her. He looked over her head at the door, sniffing the air subtly. "Move," Tamsin said, crossing her arms. "Or are there toxic fumes again?" "Coast is clear," Ronan muttered, stepping aside. Tamsin glared at him. He was a wall of heat. Standing this close, she could feel it radiating off him like a furnace. "You should get that fever checked," she said, stepping around him, "and maybe work on your hospitality skills. You're a solid 2 stars on Yelp right now." She yanked the door open and marched out into the hall. Ronan watched her go. He watched the sway of her messy ponytail, the paint stains on her overalls. He waited until she turned the corner toward the elevators before he let out a breath that rattled his ribs. He walked back to the bed. Sitting on the nightstand, gleaming in the sunlight, was a silver pocket watch. She had left it. Ronan picked it up. It smelled like her. Metal, lemon polish, and the sweet, maddening scent of the only thing that could calm the storm inside him. "Mine," his wolf whispered. "No," Ronan said aloud, closing his fist over the watch. "A security risk." Chapter 5. The Reluctant Offer. 2 days later, Tamsin was sanding a bar top in her workshop in the South Loop, trying to forget the penthouse giant. Her workshop was a chaotic sanctuary of sawdust, varnish fumes, and half-restored furniture. It was freezing. The heating unit in the corner rattled more than it heated, but it was hers. "Hand me the 220 grit," she told Stash, who was sitting on a shelf chewing on a walnut. He ignored her. Useless assistant. The sound of an engine growling outside made her look up. It wasn't the usual delivery truck rumble. It was a deep, throaty purr of an engine that cost money. Through the grimy front window, she saw a matte black SUV pull up to the curb. It looked like something a government agency would use to transport aliens. It was armored, heavy, and took up 2 parking spots. The driver's door opened, and Ronan Gallagher stepped out. Tamsin dropped her sanding block. He looked different. The wild, sweaty panic from the hotel was gone, replaced by a terrifying corporate polish. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, hiding the brute strength she knew was underneath. His beard was trimmed. He looked like money. Dangerous money. He walked to her door and knocked once. A solid, authoritative rap. Tamsin wiped her hands on her overalls and yanked the door open. "We don't buy Girl Scout cookies here." Ronan looked down at her. He didn't smile. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the silver pocket watch. "You left this," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, and controlled. Tamsin's hand flew to her pocket. My grandfather's watch. I thought I lost it in the cab. She took it, her fingers brushing his. Again, that jolt of static electricity. You drove all the way out here to return a watch? You could have mailed it. I don't trust the mail, Ronan said. He looked past her, scanning the workshop. His eyes took in the drafty windows, the pile of past due invoices on her desk, and the rusty space heater. His jaw tightened. Nice place, he lied. It has character, Tamsin said defensively, crossing her arms. And low overhead. Look, thanks for the delivery. I assume you didn't come here just to be a courier. What do you want? Ronan looked at her. He saw the pride in her chin, the exhaustion in her eyes, and the way she shivered slightly in the cold air. His wolf clawed at him, demanding he wrap her in his coat, buy the building, and burn the past due notices. He shoved his hands in his pockets to keep from doing any of that. I have a job, he said stiffly. I need a library restored. My family estate. The woodwork is original 19th century oak. It needs expert attention. Tamsin scoffed. I'm booked solid, and I'm expensive. I'll pay double your rate, Ronan said, plus materials, and a completion bonus. Tamsin choked on air. Double her rate would pay off the loan Brett had saddled her with. It would fix the Jeep. It would buy Stash premium nuts for a year. Why? She asked suspiciously. You don't even know if I'm good. You met me drunk in a hotel room. I researched you, Ronan said. You're the best in the city, and you're accountable. He pulled a folded document from his inside pocket. I had my lawyers draw up a contract. Standard NDA, liability coverage. It's ironclad. Tamsin took the paper. She scanned it. It was incredibly fair, generous even, and it was a contract, no handshake nonsense. She looked up at him. You're weird, room 702. You lock me in a room, ignore me in the morning, and then show up with a golden ticket job offer. Take the job, Tamsin, Ronan said. It sounded like a plea disguised as an order. Fine, she said, reaching for a pen on her workbench. She signed it with a flourish. But I have conditions. I play my own music, I take lunch breaks, and the squirrel comes with me. Ronan looked at Stash, who was glaring at him from the shelf. Acceptable, Ronan said. He turned to leave, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He had done it. He had secured her close where he could watch her, protect her from the Vargas clan, and ensure she didn't freeze in this dump. He had invited his greatest weakness directly into his sanctuary. See you Monday, Mr. Gallagher, Tamsin called out. Ronan paused at the door. Monday, he rumbled. And then he was gone, leaving the workshop feeling colder and emptier than it had before. Chapter 6. The Gallagher Mansion. The Gallagher estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a postcard. Tamsin pulled her forest green 1995 Jeep Wrangler up the long, winding driveway, the vehicle's suspension rattling violently over every pristine cobblestone. The mansion loomed ahead, a sprawling, limestone beast of a building with dark slate roofing and windows that looked like they judged you for buying store-brand cereal. Okay, Stash, Tamsin muttered, killing the engine. It sputtered and died with a dramatic wheeze. Best behavior, do not bite the billionaire, do not steal the silverware, and for the love of God, do not pee on the rugs. Stash, currently stuffing his cheeks with a walnut in the passenger seat, gave her a look of supreme indifference. Tamsin climbed out, grabbing her heavy canvas tool bags from the back. They weighed about 40 pounds each, filled with chisels, hammers, and sanders. She hoisted the first one onto her shoulder with a grunt. Before she could grab the second, a shadow fell over her. Let me. Tamsin jumped, nearly dropping the bag. Ronan Gallagher was standing there. He moved silently for a man the size of a vending machine. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms that looked like they could strangle a bear. He reached for her tool bag. Nope, Tamsin said, twisting away. I got it. Union rules. I carry my own gear. Ronan's hand hovered in the air. His jaw tightened. It's heavy, Tamsin. I lift heavy things for a living, Gallagher. Point me to the library. She grabbed the second bag, staggering slightly under the combined weight, but refusing to buckle. She marched past him up the front steps. Ronan watched her go, his hands twitching at his sides, fighting a visible internal battle between chivalry and the knowledge that she would likely bite him if he intervened. He opened the massive front door for her. The foyer smelled of cedar, old wax, and money. It was silent, cool, and immaculate. Library is down the hall, second door on the left, Ronan rumbled, walking beside her. He stayed close. Too close. Tamsin could feel the heat radiating off him, a steady furnace warmth that made the hair on her arms stand up. She dumped the bags in the center of the library. It was a magnificent room. Floor-to-ceiling dark oak shelving, a rolling ladder, and a massive fireplace. But the wood was dull, the finish failing. It was crying out for oil. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running a hand over a dusty banister. "It's rotting," Ronan corrected. Suddenly, a gray blur shot out of Tamsin's pocket. Stash had decided the tour was over. He launched himself off Tamsin's shoulder, scrambled up the leg of a priceless velvet armchair, and leaped onto the heavy velvet drapes, climbing toward the 20-foot ceiling. "Stash! No!" Tamsin shrieked. "Get down here!" The squirrel chattered defiantly from the curtain rod. Ronan didn't panic. He walked to the window, looked up, and extended one hand. He made a low, clicking sound in his throat. Not a human sound, but something sharper. To Tamsin's shock, Stash didn't hiss. He looked down, tilted his head, and dropped straight into Ronan's waiting palm. Ronan cupped the rodent gently, his thumb stroking the squirrel's head. Stash closed his eyes and purred. Purred. "Traitor!" Tamsin gasped. Ronan handed the squirrel back to her, his stormy eyes flashing with amusement. "He likes the cedar. Good taste." Chapter 7. Sawdust and Stairs. By noon, the library smelled of lemon oil and hard work. Tamsin had set up her station, drop cloths, sawhorses, and an array of chemical strippers that could peel the paint off a tank. She was currently on her knees, hand-sanding the intricate scrollwork on the lower shelves. It was meditative work. Or it would have been if she didn't have a 6'4" audience. Ronan hadn't left. He was sitting in a leather wingback chair in the corner, ostensibly reading a file on a tablet. But every time Tamsin looked up, he wasn't reading. He was watching her. His gaze was physical. It felt like a weight on her shoulders, heavy and warm. "Don't you have a company to run?" Tamsin asked, blowing a puff of sawdust out of her face. "Stocks to trade? Orphans to evict?" Ronan lowered the tablet. "I'm working remotely." "You've been on the same page for 40 minutes. "It's a dense file," he said smoothly. He stood up and walked over to where she was working. He moved with that predatory grace she had noticed at the hotel. No wasted energy, total silence. He stopped right behind her. Tamsin froze, her sandpaper hovering over the wood. "You missed a spot," he murmured. His voice vibrated through her chest. "I didn't miss it," Tamsin snapped, her heart rate spiking. "I'm doing the rough pass first. Back up, Gallagher. You're in my light." He didn't back up. He leaned down, bracing one hand on the shelf above her head, effectively boxing her in. He wasn't looking at the wood. He was inhaling deeply, his nose flaring slightly as he took in the scent of the sawdust and the sweat on her neck. "You smell like—" He trailed off, his voice sounding strained. "Chemical stripper and desperation?" Tamsin offered, refusing to turn around because, if she did, her nose would be pressed against his belt buckle. "Oak," he finished softly, "and lemon." He reached out, his large hand brushing against a piece of trim she had just finished sanding. He ran his thumb over the raw wood, tracing the grain she had exposed. It was an intimate gesture, strangely reverent. "It feels alive," he said. Tamsin swallowed hard. The air in the room had grown thick, charged with static. "It's wood, Ronan. It's dead. That's how furniture works." He pulled his hand back, the spell breaking. He stepped away, adjusting his cuffs, his face returning to that mask of corporate indifference. "Right," he said roughly. "I'll let you work." But he didn't leave the room. He went back to his chair, picked up his tablet, and continued to stare at her back with the intensity of a man starving to death while watching someone bake bread. Chapter 8. The Heavy Table. The conflict started with a desk. It was a massive, double-pedestal partner's desk made of solid quarter-sawn oak. It sat in the center of the room like a monolith. Tamsin needed to move it to get to the floorboards underneath. She nudged it with her hip. It didn't budge. It felt bolted to the floor. "I'll call the movers," Ronan said from his corner. "I got it," Tamsin grunted. She wedged her shoulder against the side. "It's just friction. Physics." "Tamsin, that piece weighs over 300 pounds. Leave it." "I am an independent contractor," she huffed, grabbing the edge of the desk and planting her boots. "I do not need a man to move furniture for me." She heaved. To her credit, the desk moved. To her detriment, it moved because the antique rug beneath her boots slipped on the polished floor. Her feet went out from under her. Gravity took over. Tamsin fell backward, dragging the massive desk with her. It tipped on its edge, teetering for a split second before gravity decided to bring 300 pounds of solid oak crashing down directly onto her legs. She squeezed her eyes shut and braced for the crunch of breaking bone. Whoosh! A gust of wind hit her face. There was a dull thud, but not on her legs. Tamsin opened her eyes. Ronan was there. He was in a lunge position, one knee on the floor between her legs. His right hand was raised, palm flat against the falling desk. He was holding it. He wasn't straining. He wasn't shaking. He was holding 300 pounds of oak in the air with one hand, his arm extended casually as if he were catching a beach ball. The silence in the room was deafening. Ronan stared down at her, his eyes wide, the gold flecks swirling violently in the gray irises. His chest was heaving, but not from exertion, from panic. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice rough. Tamsin stared at his arm. The bicep was flexed, straining against the white fabric of his shirt, but the sheer impossibility of the leverage didn't make sense. Physics didn't work like that. "How?" she whispered. Ronan realized what he was doing. He shoved the desk back upright with a grunt that sounded fake, setting it down gently on its legs. He stood up quickly, brushing his hands off. "Adrenaline," he said. "Crazy thing, adrenaline." Chapter 9. The Denial. "Adrenaline?" Tamsin repeated, scrambling to her feet. "You caught a desk, Ronan. With one hand. That thing weighs as much as a Honda Civic." Ronan wouldn't look at her. He walked over to the window, putting the width of the room between them. He was radiating heat again. She could practically see the waves distorting the air around him. "I work out," he said flatly. "You work out?" Tamsin laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "What gym do you go to? The Avengers training facility? CrossFit for Kryptonians?" "It looked heavier than it was," he lied. "Empty drawers." "Bullshit," Tamsin said. She walked over to the desk and tried to lift one corner. She strained until her face turned red. It lifted maybe an inch. "I can't even budge it." "You're small," Ronan said dismissively, "and you're weird." She pulled her phone out of her pocket. Her hands were shaking. "I'm taking a break. I need air. And coffee. And sanity." She marched out of the library, leaving him standing by the window. As soon as she was in the hallway, she typed a text to Keisha with trembling fingers. "Tamsin, the client just caught a 300-pound desk with one hand. Saved my legs." Keisha, like a reflex? Tamsin, like he was catching a frisbee. He didn't even grunt. Keisha, girl, that is not normal. That is steroids or cyborg. Is he hot? Tamsin, annoyingly hot. And he growls. Keisha, run. Back in the library, Ronan leaned his forehead against the cool glass of the window. He closed his eyes, cursing softly. He had slipped. He had let the wolf take the wheel because the thought of her being crushed had bypassed his brain and gone straight to his instincts. He should fire her. He should pay out the contract, give her a massive severance, and send her away before she figured it out. It was the only safe option. But then he inhaled. Her scent was still in the air, sawdust, lemons, and the lingering spike of her fear. "I can't," he whispered to the empty room. "I can't let her go." Chapter 10. The Ex Returns. Tamsin was outside by her Jeep, drinking a lukewarm coffee from her thermos and trying to convince herself that Ronan Gallagher was just a very strong, very strange man on a high-protein diet. "Tamsin!" The voice made her spine stiffen. She knew that whine. She turned to see a silver BMW pulling up the driveway. Brett. Her ex-boyfriend climbed out, looking as sleek and slimy as ever in his cheap suit. He spotted her and smirked, walking over with that arrogant stride that used to make her swoon, but now just made her want to vomit. "Brett," she said, screwing the cap back on her thermos. "How did you find me? This is a private estate." "I have friends in real estate," Brett said, stopping a few feet away. "Saw the heat parked out front. Figured you were scamming another rich client." "I'm working," Tamsin said coldly. "Something you should try. Leave, Brett. I'm busy." "I'm not leaving until we talk about the credit card debt," Brett said, stepping closer. "You stopped paying the minimums. My score is tanking, Tam." "The debt you racked up in my name?" Tamsin laughed bitterly. "I'm disputing those charges. You forged my signature." "Don't be a bitch," Brett snapped. He reached out and grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "You're going to call the bank and—" The air temperature dropped 10 degrees. A sound started. It wasn't a noise, it was a vibration. A low, subterranean rumble that Tamsin felt in the soles of her boots before she heard it with her ears. It rattled the windows of the Jeep. Brett froze. "What the hell is that?" From the shadows of the mansion's front portico, Ronan emerged. He wasn't walking like a CEO anymore. He was stalking. His head was lowered, his shoulders hunched forward, his hands curled into loose fists at his sides. He moved with a terrifying fluidity, silent and lethal. But the sound, it was coming from his chest. A continuous, rolling growl that triggered every primate instinct Tamsin had left. Predator! Danger! Run! Brett dropped her arm and stumbled back, his face draining of color. Who is this guy?" Ronan didn't stop until he was standing directly behind Tamsin, looming over her like a dark mountain. He placed one large hand on her shoulder, gentle, possessive, and stared at Brett with eyes that were no longer gray. They were molten, glowing gold. "Mine," Ronan said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that carried the weight of a death sentence. Brett looked at Ronan's eyes, then at his teeth, which seemed sharper than they should be. The slimy real estate agent made a high-pitched squeaking noise, scrambled backward, tripped over his own feet, and practically crawled back to his BMW. He peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying everywhere, leaving Tamsin alone with the monster who had just claimed her. Chapter 11. The Flight Response. The silence in the driveway was heavy, suffocating, and vibrating with a residual energy that made Tamsin's teeth ache. She spun around, breaking Ronan's hold on her shoulder. She scrambled back until her hip hit the side mirror of her Jeep. "What was that?" she demanded, her voice an octave higher than usual. "And don't tell me it was asthma, Gallagher. You just growled at him. Like a subwoofer." Ronan stood 5 feet away, his chest heaving. He blinked hard, once, twice. When he opened his eyes again, the terrifying molten gold was gone, replaced by his usual storm cloud gray. But the heat radiating off him was still intense enough to wilt the hydrangeas lining the driveway. He looked at his hands, then at her terrified face. His posture changed instantly. The looming mountain of aggression collapsed into something deliberately smaller. He slumped his shoulders, uncurled his fists, and took a slow, deliberate step back, turning his palms outward in a universal gesture of surrender. "I apologize," he said, his voice gravelly but human. "I have a temper." "A temper?" Tamsin pointed a shaking finger at him. "You didn't just yell at him, Ronan. You vibrated, and you said, mine. Explain that part, because I am very much not yours. I am an independent contractor with a very specific clause about workplace harassment. Ronan winced. He ran a hand over his beard, looking genuinely pained. He was threatening you, Ronan said carefully, on my property, while you are under my protection. I don't like bullies, Tamsin, and I don't like people touching what is under my care. He avoided her eyes, looking at the gravel. It was a submission tactic. He was letting her be the big one in the interaction, proving he wasn't a threat to her. You scared him to death, Tamsin whispered, her heart rate finally starting to slow. I've never seen Brett run like that. He left tire marks. He won't come back, Ronan promised darkly. Then he softened his tone. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? Tamsin rubbed her arm where Brett had grabbed her. It was fine. No, I'm fine, just startled. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was still standing with his head bowed, waiting for her verdict. He looked like a massive, chastised war dog, waiting to see if he was going to be kicked. Okay. She let out a breath she'd been holding. Okay, just, next time, maybe call security instead of going full exorcist? My insurance doesn't cover supernatural events. Ronan's mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. Noted. I'll work on my conflict resolution. Chapter 12. The Squirrel's Betrayal. By Wednesday, the tension in the library had shifted from terrifying to confusing. Tamsin was up on the rolling ladder, polishing the crown molding. Stash was supposed to be supervising from his travel cage, but he had picked the lock, again, and was currently AWOL. Stash, Tamsin called down, if you chew on the first editions, I'm docking your walnut allowance. He's fine, Ronan's voice came from the fireplace. Tamsin looked down. Ronan was sitting in his usual wingback chair, reviewing blueprints. Stash was sitting on the armrest of the chair, looking indistinguishable from a tiny, furry gargoyle. As Tamsin watched, horrified, Stash reached into his cheek pouches. He pulled out a slightly slobbery, half-chewed acorn. He waddled over to Ronan's hand, which was resting on the leather, and placed the nut gently on the CEO's knuckle. Ronan didn't flinch. He didn't recoil in disgust. He slowly turned his hand over, accepting the gift with the solemn gravity of a king accepting a tribute. Thank you, Ronan murmured to the squirrel. Stash chattered happily and patted Ronan's thumb. Excuse me? Tamsin scrambled down the ladder, wiping her hands on her overalls. What is happening right now? That squirrel hates men. He bit my mailman last week. He bites me on Tuesdays just to keep me humble. Ronan inspected the slobbery acorn. He has good judgment. He knows I'm not a threat. You are literally the biggest threat in this zip code, Tamsin argued, walking over to them. You're 6'4" and you growl. Why does he like you? Ronan looked up at her, his gray eyes glinting with amusement. Maybe he respects hierarchy, or maybe he just knows who buys the high-quality nuts. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a bag of premium, organic shelled walnuts. Stash let out a squeak of pure joy and dove into the bag. You're bribing my security detail, Tamsin accused, crossing her arms, but she couldn't hide the smile tugging at her lips. Seeing the massive, intense CEO sharing a snack with a rodent in a denim vest was disarming. It's not a bribe, Ronan said, feeding Stash a nut. It's a diplomatic offering. Chapter 13. The Injury. The accident happened on Friday, just before quitting time. Tamsin was tired. Her muscles ached from a week of overhead sanding, and her focus was slipping. She was carving a replacement piece for a damaged rosette on the mantelpiece, using a razor-sharp wood chisel. The oak was stubborn. Tamsin applied more pressure, leaning her weight into the tool. Careful, Ronan warned. He was standing close. Too close. He had been hovering all afternoon, handing her tools before she even asked for them. I got it, Tamsin muttered. The wood knot gave way suddenly. The chisel slipped. It flew past the wood and sliced deeply across the back of Ronan's hand, which she had instinctively thrown out to steady the piece she was working on. It was a bad cut. Deep. "Oh, God!" Tamsin dropped the chisel. Bright red blood welled up instantly, dripping onto the pristine hardwood floor. It wasn't a scratch. It was a gash. "I'm so sorry. I didn't— You moved your hand and—" Tamsin was hyperventilating. She grabbed a rag from her belt and pressed it against his hand, her own hands shaking violently. "We need a hospital. That needs stitches. Ronan, I'm so sorry." Ronan didn't pull away. He didn't even look at the wound. He was looking at her face, his expression calm, almost bored. "It's fine, Tamsin. It's a scratch." "It is not a scratch. I can see your anatomy." She pressed harder on the rag, terrified by the amount of blood. "Don't move. I have a first aid kit in the Jeep. I have butterfly closures. Just keep pressure. Don't bleed out on the antique rug." She turned and bolted for the door, her boots slipping on the floor as she scrambled to get to her car. Ronan watched her go. As soon as she was out of sight, he hissed through his teeth, not in pain, but in annoyance. He pulled the rag away. The blood was already slowing, the flow stopping as his platelets went into hyperdrive. "Sloppy," he muttered to himself. Chapter 14. The Missing Piece. Tamsin sprinted back into the library 45 seconds later, clutching a red plastic first aid box. "Okay, I have antiseptic. I have gauze. I have—" She stopped. Ronan was standing by the fireplace, wiping his hand with a clean paper towel. He looked completely unbothered. "Let me see," she ordered, rushing forward and dropping the kit on the floor. She grabbed his hand, bracing herself for the gore. She froze. There was no blood. There was no gash. There was a faint, angry pink line across the back of his hand, like a cat scratch that was a week old. And something else. Steam. Faint, white wisps of vapor were rising from his skin, curling into the cool air of the library. His skin felt burning hot to the touch. "Where is it?" Tamsin whispered, rubbing her thumb over the pink line. "I cut you. I saw it. There was blood everywhere." Ronan pulled his hand back gently, tucking it into his pocket. "It looked worse than it was. Just a surface scratch. Capillaries bleed a lot." "Capillaries?" Tamsin looked at the floor. The blood droplets she had seen were gone. He had wiped them up. "Ronan, I saw the chisel go in. That was half an inch deep. And why are you smoking?" "I'm running hot," he said, turning away to pick up the fallen chisel. "Body heat. Cold room. It's just condensation." "Condensation," Tamsin repeated flatly. She stood up slowly. Her brain was trying to rationalize it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe the light was bad. But she knew wood. She knew tools. And she knew what a chisel did to flesh. "You heal fast," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Good genes," Ronan said. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Go home, Tamsin. You're exhausted. We're done for the week." He walked out of the library without looking back, leaving Tamsin standing in the center of the room with a first aid kit and a very bad feeling in the pit of her stomach. Chapter 15. The Stakeout. "This is a terrible idea," Keisha hissed. "This is how white people die in horror movies." "Hush," Tamsin whispered, and passed the binoculars. It was 11 p.m. on Saturday. They were parked in a dense grove of trees overlooking the service entrance of the Gallagher estate. They were in Keisha's Prius because Tamsin's Jeep sounded like a lawnmower in a blender and would have blown their cover instantly. "Remind me why we are stalking your hot rich client?" Keisha asked, adjusting her seat. "He caught a table, Kay, with one hand. And yesterday I stabbed him, and he healed in 40 seconds. And he steamed. He literally steamed like a dumpling." "Okay, so he's on steroids. Or he's an alien. Either way, is it our business?" "It is when I'm working in his house." Tamsin adjusted the focus on the binoculars. "I need to know if he's dangerous." "Oh my God," Tamsin gasped. "Look!" A convoy of motorcycles was rolling silently up the service road. No headlights. Big, heavy bikes. The riders were massive, wearing leather cuts, but not like a street gang. They looked like paramilitaries. They stopped near the garage. Ronan stepped out of the shadows. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a tight black t-shirt. He looked bigger in the dark, his movements sharp and aggressive. The lead biker got off and approached him. Tamsin expected a drug deal. Instead, the biker bowed. He tilted his head to the side, exposing his neck. Ronan didn't bow back. He placed a hand on the guy's neck, squeezing it. It looked ritualistic. Dominant. "Is he initiation?" Keisha whispered. "Is this a cult? Tamsin, you are working for a cult leader." Suddenly, Ronan froze. He went perfectly still. He turned his head slowly, scanning the tree line. He lifted his chin, inhaling deeply, tasting the night air. Then, he looked. From 100 yards away, through the darkness and the trees, Ronan Gallagher locked eyes directly with Tamsin's binoculars. His eyes flared. Even at this distance, she saw the gold flash. He didn't yell. He didn't point. He just smirked, a slow, terrifying, knowing curl of his lip, and tapped his nose. "I smell you!" "Drive!" Tamsin shrieked, dropping the binoculars. "Keisha, drive! He sees us!" "He can't see us! It's pitch black!" "He smelled us! Go!" Chapter 16. The Break-In. Monday morning at the Gallagher estate felt less like a workday and more like an infiltration mission. Tamsin parked her Jeep, which was making a new, concerning clunking sound, around the back of the mansion. She walked into the library with her head down, carrying a thermos of coffee that was mostly espresso and anxiety. "Okay," she whispered to Stash, who was poking his head out of her overall pocket. "We act normal. We sand the shelves. We do not look at the billionaire like he's a science experiment." Stash chattered, a sound that clearly meant, "You are sweating." "I am not sweating," Tamsin lied, wiping her palms on her denim thighs. She worked for 3 hours, sanding the same 3 feet of molding until the wood was practically polished glass. Every time the floorboards creaked, she jumped. But Ronan didn't show. The library was empty, silent, and devoid of brooding alphas. At noon, she made her move. "Lunch break," she announced to the empty room. She crept into the hallway. She knew where Ronan's home office was. She'd seen him turning left at the top of the stairs every morning. It was the nerve center of Gallagher Holdings, and likely where he kept the secrets that explained why he could catch furniture and steam like a kettle. The door was heavy mahogany. Locked. Tamsin examined the handle and snorted. For a billionaire security mogul, Ronan had a blind spot for antiques. He hadn't updated the original 19th century hardware. "Child's play," Tamsin muttered. She pulled a slender lock-picking tool from her belt. It was technically for antique cabinetry, but a vintage pin tumbler was a pin tumbler. It took her 6 seconds. Click! She slipped inside. The office was modern, a stark contrast to the rest of the house. Monitors covered one wall. Maps of the city were spread across a glass desk. "Jackpot," she whispered. She went to the desk. A monitor was active, displaying a pause frame from a security feed. It was the back gate. The timestamp was from last night. Tamsin hit play. On the screen, a dark figure, Ronan, was running toward the 10-foot iron gate. He didn't slow down. He didn't climb. He leaped. He cleared the 10-foot spikes with a vertical jump that defied gravity, landing in a crouch on the asphalt before sprinting into the darkness at a speed that blurred the camera. "Holy," Tamsin breathed. "He's not on steroids. He's Captain America." "I prefer enhanced." A deep voice rumbled from the doorway. Tamsin spun around so fast she knocked a stapler off the desk. Ronan was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed over his massive chest. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in a gray Henley that clung to every muscle, looking relaxed, dangerous, and entirely too calm for a man whose office had just been broken into. Chapter 17. The Confrontation. Tamsin's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She backed up until her hips hit the glass desk. "I can explain," she started, then stopped. "Actually, no, You can explain. She pointed a shaking finger at the monitor behind her. That isn't CrossFit, Ronan. People don't jump over security gates. They climb them. And they definitely don't smell people from 100 yards away in the dark. Ronan didn't move. He just watched her with those storm cloud eyes, his expression unreadable. You're trespassing, Tamsin. And you're deflecting! Tamsin grabbed the edge of the desk. I'm not stupid. I restore things. I look at details. You run at 102 degrees. You heal in seconds. You caught a desk that weighs as much as my car. And you growled at my ex-boyfriend like a tiger in a zoo. She took a breath, her voice trembling. What are you? Are you government? Some kind of super soldier experiment? Because if the CIA is going to raid this house, I need to know so I can get my tools out. Ronan pushed off the doorframe. He walked into the room, closing the distance between them. He didn't rush. He moved with that fluid, stalking grace that made her knees weak and her instincts scream. He stopped 2 feet away. He was so big, he blocked out the light from the hallway. Not government, he said softly. Then what? Tamsin demanded, tipping her head back to look him in the eye. Tell me the truth. No more gaslighting, no more capillaries. Ronan looked down at her. He saw the fear in her hazel eyes, but he also saw the defiance. She was terrified, but she was standing her ground. His wolf purred in approval. Strong mate, brave mate. You know what I am, Ronan said, his voice dropping to that vibration that rattled her chest. You've known since the first night. Your squirrel knew before you did. Say it, Tamsin whispered. I need you to say it. Ronan inhaled deeply, letting his eyes shift. The gray bled away, consumed by a brilliant, molten gold. I am the alpha of the Chicago pack, he said, and you are standing in the middle of my territory. Chapter 18. The Truth. The silence that followed was absolute. Tamsin stared at his golden eyes. They were beautiful, terrifying, glowing, alien, and undeniable. A werewolf, she said flatly. We prefer shifter, Ronan corrected gently. But yes. Tamsin let out a short, hysterical laugh. She rubbed her face with her hands. Okay. So, the Twilight jokes. Keisha is going to win $50. I bet her you were a cyborg. I am flesh and blood, Tamsin. Ronan took a step closer, his voice strained. I am a predator. My senses are sharper than yours. My strength is difficult to restrain, and my temper is tied to instincts that are older than this house. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. He wanted to touch her, to soothe the spike of cortisol he could smell on her skin, but he pulled back. He wouldn't trap her. I shouldn't want you, he admitted, the words tearing out of him. My world is dangerous, violent. We have laws you don't understand and enemies you can't fight with a tire iron. Being near me puts a target on your back. Then why did you hire me? Tamsin asked, her voice quiet. Why bring me here? Because I couldn't stay away, Ronan said simply. The raw honesty of it hit her harder than the growl. Because when you are not here, my bones ache. Because you smell like peace. Tamsin stared at him. This man, this monster, who looked like he could crush a tank, was looking at her like she was the only water in a desert. She looked at Stash, who had poked his head out of her pocket and was sniffing the air calmly. So, Tamsin said, her voice shaking but her chin high. Do you need, heartworm medication? Is there a shedding season I should worry about? Ronan blinked. The gold in his eyes faded slightly, replaced by a look of bewildered amusement. A low rumble of a laugh started in his chest. No heartworm, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting. And I'm impeccably groomed. Good, Tamsin said. She grabbed her coffee thermos off the desk. Because I have a lot of sanding to do, and if you pee on the library rug, I'm charging you extra. She walked past him, her legs shaking, her heart racing, but her head held high. She needed to get out of that room before she did something stupid, like hug him. Chapter 19. Processing. The ghosting. Tamsin lasted until 5 p.m. Then she fled. She drove home in silence, marched into her apartment, locked the door, and stared at the wall for 4 hours. "He's a werewolf," she told Stash, who was eating a grape on the counter. "A literal werewolf, with claws. And a pack." Stash ignored her. Tuesday came. Tamsin didn't go to the mansion. She texted Ronan a lie about a supply run and stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. Wednesday came. She texted that she had food poisoning. At the Gallagher mansion, Ronan was unraveling. He stood in the library, staring at the half-sanded shelves. The room smelled stale. The lemon scent was fading, replaced by the cold, empty smell of dust. He paced. He checked his phone every 3 minutes. He walked the perimeter of the estate 4 times, his wolf pacing just beneath his skin, agitated and snarling. She left. She ran. "You scared her." "I told her the truth," Ronan growled to the empty room. He picked up a sanding block she had left behind, gripping it until the foam crumbled in his fist. She needed to know. Mate gone, mate unsafe. He wanted to drive to her apartment. He wanted to break down her door and carry her back to the fortress where he could see her. But he forced his feet to stay planted. He had promised not to be a bully. He had to give her space to process the monster, even if the silence felt like it was peeling the skin off his bones. By Thursday morning, Tamsin was pacing her own apartment. "I miss the cedar," she admitted to the empty room. "And the coffee. And, okay, I miss the giant brooding gargoyle." She grabbed her keys. "Get in the vest, Stash. We're going back to work. I have a contract. I am accountable." Chapter 20. The Vargas Threat. The tires were the final straw. Tamsin had parked the Jeep on the street outside her workshop to load up some specialized molding for the library. She came out 10 minutes later with a bundle of oak trim on her shoulder, humming a nervous tune. She stopped. Her Jeep was leaning aggressively to the left. Both driver-side tires were shredded. "Oh, come on!" Tamsin dropped the wood and ran to the car. "I just bought these. They were used, but they were new to me." She crouched down to inspect the damage. She expected to see a knife slash or a nail. She froze. The rubber wasn't cut. It was torn. There were 3 distinct, parallel gouges in the sidewall of the front tire. They were too wide for a knife. They looked like claws, she whispered. A cold shiver went down her spine. She looked around the empty street. It felt quiet. Too quiet. A black SUV screeched around the corner. Tamsin jumped, grabbing her tire iron from the passenger seat. The SUV slammed to a halt next to her Jeep. The door flew open and Ronan spilled out. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair messier than usual, and his eyes were wild. He saw the Jeep. He saw the tires. He didn't say a word. He walked over, knelt down, and ran a finger over the shredded rubber. He smelled it. Vargas. He stood up slowly. The air around him began to vibrate. The heat coming off him hit Tamsin from 3 feet away. "Ronan?" she asked, clutching her tire iron. Did a bear do this?" Ronan turned to her. His eyes were solid, burning gold. There was no human gray left. His voice was a low, terrifying command that brooked no argument. "Get in the car," he said. "My Jeep!" "Leave it," he snarled. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with a desperate, unbreakable grip, and pulled her toward the armored SUV. "You are not staying here. Pack a bag. Grab the squirrel. You are moving in." "I am not moving in," Tamsin protested, digging her heels in. "I have a lease. I have plants." Ronan spun on her, grabbing her shoulders. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "They marked your car, Tamsin. That wasn't vandalism. It was a hunting tag. You are moving into the estate where I can protect you, or I am sleeping on your doormat. Choose." Tamsin looked at the claw marks. She looked at the terrifying, beautiful monster who was trembling with the effort to keep her safe. "Okay," she whispered. but Stash gets his own room. Chapter 21. Protective Custody. Packing a go bag while a 6'4" werewolf paced your living room was not conducive to efficient organization. "Tamsin," Ronan growled from the doorway of her bedroom. "Toothbrush. Squirrel. Let's go." "I am packing," Tamsin snapped, shoving a handful of socks into her duffel bag. "You can't just uproot a person in 10 minutes, Ronan. I have plants. I have perishable milk in the fridge. I have a life." "You have a target on your back," he corrected, his voice tight with suppressed panic. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking out the window, scanning the street below where his armored SUV idled next to her ruined Jeep. Tamsin paused, holding a potted succulent. She looked at his back. His shoulders were rigid, the muscles bunched under his shirt. He was radiating that intense, furnace-like heat that she had come to associate with his wolf being close to the surface. "Look," she said, softening her tone slightly. "I appreciate the rescue, really, but isn't this overkill? It's just tires. I can handle flat tires. I can handle bullies. I've been doing it my whole life." Ronan turned slowly. His eyes were a swirling mix of gray and gold, the animal pacing right behind his pupils. "Those weren't flat tires, Tamsin," he said low. "That was a message. The Vargas clan didn't slash them to inconvenience you. They tore them to show me they can get close enough to touch what is mine." He walked over, taking the succulent from her hand and setting it gently on the dresser. Then he framed her face with his large, warm hands. "I cannot handle you being exposed," he whispered, the vibration of his voice humming against her skin. "If they hurt you to get to me, I will burn this city down. Please, get in the car." The raw, terrifying honesty of it silenced her. Tamsin swallowed hard, nodding. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, let me get Stash." 5 minutes later, they were in the armored SUV. Stash was in his travel carrier in the back seat, chattering angrily about the indignity of it all. Ronan drove with one hand on the wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. When the iron gates of the Gallagher estate closed behind them with a heavy, final clang, Tamsin expected to feel trapped. Instead, as the massive limestone mansion came into view, bathed in the orange light of the setting sun, she felt her shoulders drop. She looked at Ronan. He let out a breath that seemed to rattle his entire frame, the tension bleeding out of him the moment they were inside the perimeter. "You're safe here," he said, echoing the words he'd spoken in the hotel room. "I know," Tamsin said quietly. Then she narrowed her eyes. "But if you think I'm doing your laundry, you're out of your mind." Chapter 22. Roommates. Living with Ronan Gallagher was like living with a nuclear reactor that insisted on using coasters. By Friday afternoon, the domestic friction was palpable. Ronan was a creature of rigid order. His kitchen was a pristine, stainless steel operating theater. Tamsin was a creature of creative chaos. Her presence was an explosion of sawdust, coffee cups, and misplaced tools. "Tamsin," Ronan said that morning, standing in the kitchen doorway. He was holding up a single sawdust-covered sock. "Why is this in the fruit bowl?" Tamsin didn't look up from her coffee. "I was looking for a polishing rag. I got distracted. It's clean." "It is in the fruit bowl," Ronan repeated, his eye twitching slightly. "It adds texture to the apples," Tamsin said, turning a page of her book. "Relax, Roomie. It's lived in." He sighed, a long, suffering sound, but he didn't throw the sock away. He folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. Despite the bickering, the evenings were different. That night, they were in the library. Tamsin was working on the lower shelves, applying a finishing wax. It was quiet, just the sound of the rain against the windows and the soft shh-shh of her cloth against the wood. Ronan wasn't hovering for once. He was on the floor next to her, inspecting the hinges of a cabinet she had fixed earlier. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "You balanced this perfectly," he murmured, opening and closing the door. "It used to squeak." "I replaced the pin," Tamsin said, dipping her cloth in the wax. and sanded the housing. It was misaligned by 2 millimeters. Ronan looked at her. He was sitting cross-legged, his massive frame looking strangely at home on the floor. The golden lamplight caught the auburn in his beard and the tired lines around his eyes. "You fix things," he said softly. "That's who you are. You see something broken and you don't throw it away. You make it work." Tamsin paused. She looked at the scar on his hand, the one she had made, which was now just a faint white line. "Some things are worth saving," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ronan went still. He reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on the wood. His skin was hot, his palm rough. He didn't pull her toward him, he just held her hand there, anchoring her. "I haven't felt worth saving in a long time," he admitted, the words rough. Tamsin turned her hand over, interlacing her fingers with his. "Well," she said, squeezing his hand, "good thing I'm on the payroll." They sat there for a long time, holding hands on the library floor, listening to the rain turn into a storm. Chapter 23. The Storm. The weather turned violent on Friday night. It wasn't just rain anymore, it was a Midwestern tempest. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind howled around the stone corners of the mansion like a dying animal. Tamsin hated storms. She sat in the library, curled up in the wingback chair with her knees to her chest, flinching every time the thunder cracked. Stash was buried deep inside her hoodie pocket, refusing to come out. Ronan was worse. He was pacing the length of the room, back and forth, a caged predator. The barometric pressure was messing with his inner ear, his wolf reacting to the electricity in the air. He was shirtless, his skin gleaming with a sheen of sweat, his muscles jumping with every flash of lightning. "Can you stop?" Tamsin snapped after his 50th lap. "You're making me dizzy." Ronan stopped. He turned to her, his eyes glowing a bright, agitated gold. "The pressure," he growled, rubbing his chest. "It feels like the sky is falling." Boom! A crack of thunder shook the house. Tamsin yelped, burying her face in her knees. Ronan was there instantly. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair. "You're afraid," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. The alpha in him pushed past his own agitation, focusing entirely on her distress. "I don't like loud noises," Tamsin mumbled into her jeans. "It's stupid." "It's not stupid," Ronan said. He reached out, hesitating, then placed his large hands over her ears. "Better?" Tamsin looked up. His palms were warm, muffling the howling wind and the cracking thunder. He was leaning close, his face inches from hers. She could smell him, cedar, rain, and the sharp, electric scent of ozone. "Better," she whispered. He didn't pull away. He stayed there, crouching in front of her, acting as a human shield against the storm. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, his gaze dropping to her mouth, then back up to her eyes. The air between them crackled, heavier than the storm outside. "Tamsin," he breathed, his voice wrecked. "I am trying so hard to be a gentleman." "Why?" Tamsin asked, her breath hitching. Her hands moved up, gripping his wrists. She didn't push him away. She pulled him closer. "I think we established I don't like gentlemen. I like the guy who catches tables." Ronan groaned, a low sound that vibrated through her hands. "If I start," he warned, his pupils blowing wide, swallowing the gold, "I won't be able to stop. The bond, it's tearing me apart." "Then let it break," Tamsin whispered. Chapter 24. Surrender. The restraint snapped. Ronan surged up, pulling her out of the chair. A furious chittering sound erupted from her pocket as Stash, realizing he was about to be squished, scrambled out of her hoodie and leaped for the safety of the hallway, just as Ronan pulled her into him. He didn't kiss her gently, he devoured her. His mouth crashed onto hers, hot and demanding, tasting of desperation and long-suppressed hunger. Tamsin gasped, opening to him, wrapping her arms around his neck to anchor herself as he lifted her off the floor. Her legs wrapped around his waist instinctively. He felt solid, invincible, a wall of heat and muscle that was entirely focused on her. He carried her to the leather sofa, not breaking the kiss, growling low in his throat as her hands tangled in his hair. He laid her down, his massive body covering hers, shielding her from the storm, from the world, from everything but him. "Mine," he rasped against her throat, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin over her pulse. "You are mine, Tamsin. Say it." "Yours," she breathless, arching into him. "I'm yours, Ronan." The words acted like a key in a lock. Ronan shuddered, his control dissolving. He stripped the layers between them, the flannel shirt, the overalls, with hands that were shaking but gentle. He worshipped her with a terrifying intensity, his touch searing everywhere it landed. It wasn't just physical, it was a drowning. As they moved together, the storm outside ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his skin, the gold of his eyes, and the overwhelming sense of rightness that settled into her bones. He was heavy, dominant, and demanding, but every touch was laced with a reverence that made her chest ache. He treated her like she was precious glass he was terrified of breaking, even as he claimed her with a primal thoroughness that left no room for doubt. When the crest came, it was blinding. Tamsin cried out, digging her nails into his shoulders, and Ronan roared her name, burying his face in her neck as the bond snapped into place. A permanent, golden tether that tied her soul to his. He collapsed against her, his weight a heavy, comforting blanket. His heart hammered against hers, their rhythms syncing up in the quiet aftermath. "I have you," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with sleep and satisfaction. "I finally have you." Chapter 25. The Morning After. The sun was blinding. Tamsin blinked awake, feeling like she had been hit by a very sexy truck. Her body ached in places she didn't know existed, but it was a good ache, a satisfied ache. She was pinned. Ronan's arm was draped over her waist like a steel band, holding her flush against his side. He was still asleep, face buried in the pillow next to hers, looking younger and softer than she had ever seen him. For a moment, panic flared. "What have I done? I slept with the client. I slept with a werewolf." Then Ronan shifted. Even in sleep, he sensed her distress. He mumbled something unintelligible and pulled her closer, nuzzling the back of her neck. The panic vanished, replaced by a warm, fuzzy feeling that Tamsin recognized with horror as happiness. "Oh no," she whispered to the ceiling. "I'm in love with the gargoyle." Ronan's eyes cracked open. They were gray again, sleepy and hooded. He focused on her face, and a slow, lazy smile spread across his lips. "Morning," he rasped. "Morning," Tamsin said, trying to act cool and failing. "You realize this violates several clauses of our contract." "I'll write an addendum," Ronan said, leaning in to kiss her forehead. Clause 4. The Alpha gets to cuddle the contractor. "I charge extra for cuddling." "Put it on my tab." He went to kiss her properly, but a furious scratching sound interrupted them. It was coming from the hallway door. Scritch, scritch, thump. Ronan froze. Tamsin giggled. "We locked him out," she whispered. Ronan groaned, rolling onto his back and covering his face with his hands. "He's going to kill me! I locked the security detail out of the perimeter." Ronan got up, pulling on a pair of sweatpants, a view Tamsin greatly appreciated, and opened the door. Stash stood there. He looked at Ronan. He looked at the disheveled bed. He looked back at Ronan. With a chitter of pure rage, the squirrel marched into the room, climbed up the side of the bed, and stared Tamsin dead in the eye. Then he turned and grabbed Ronan's pillow. He began to shred it. Feathers flew everywhere. It was a massacre. "I deserve that," Ronan said solemnly, watching the destruction. Tamsin laughed, burying her face in the duvet. "Welcome to the family, Ronan." Chapter 26. The Trap. The sense of safety was a narcotic. It made Tamsin stupid. By 2 p.m., Ronan was in his home office on a conference call that sounded serious, involving words like merger and hostile acquisition. Tamsin was in the library, staring at a piece of crown molding that refused to sit flush. "I need the Japanese pole saw," she muttered, patting her pockets. "And the beeswax finish." Both were at her workshop. She looked at the phone on the desk. She should interrupt Ronan. She should ask for a driver. But he looked so focused, and she was just going to the South Loop for 20 minutes. It was Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining. The Vargas clan hadn't been seen in days. "Come on, Stash," she whispered, grabbing the travel carrier. "Quick trip, in and out." She booked a rideshare. The driver, a chatty man named Gary in a Toyota Camry, didn't ask why she was bringing a squirrel. When they pulled up to her workshop, the street was quiet. Her Jeep was still there, sitting sadly on its shredded rims like a deflated green beetle. Tamsin winced at the sight. "I'll be 5 minutes," she told Gary. "Keep the meter running." She unlocked the front door of the workshop. It smelled like it always did: sawdust, cold coffee, and old varnish. She set Stash's carrier on the counter and headed for the back storage room where she kept the specialty tools. She found the saw. She grabbed the wax. She was turning to leave when she smelled it. It wasn't varnish. It was sharper, sweeter. Gasoline. Tamsin froze. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, a primal warning system she hadn't possessed a week ago. Click! The sound came from the front door, the deadbolt sliding home. Tamsin dropped the saw. She ran toward the front of the shop, stopping just short of the entryway where the smell was strongest. Through the grimy display window, she saw Gary's Camry speeding away, peeling out as if he'd seen a ghost. Standing on the sidewalk were 3 men. They weren't wearing delivery uniforms. They were wearing leather cuts. One of them held a red gas can. Another held a flare. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Tamsin whispered. The man with the flare grinned, showing too many teeth. He tossed it. The flare hit the puddle of gasoline they had clearly poured under the door while she was in the back. The world turned orange instantly. The whoosh of ignition sucked the air right out of the room. Chapter 27. The Call. Fire moves faster than people think. It doesn't crawl, it eats. Within seconds, the front wall of the workshop was a wall of flame. The heat was instantaneous, a physical blow that knocked Tamsin back. Smoke, black and oily from the burning varnish and old wood, rolled across the ceiling like a thunderhead. "Stash!" Tamsin screamed. She grabbed the carrier from the counter just as the display case next to it shattered from the heat. "Back door," she coughed, spinning around. "We go out the back." She ran to the rear exit. She shoved the crash bar. It didn't budge an inch. It felt solid, immovable, like someone had chained it shut from the outside. "Okay," Tamsin said, her voice shaking but her hands steady. "Okay, no panic. Panic kills." She retreated to the bathroom in the center of the shop, the only room with tile walls and a heavy door. She shoved wet towels under the crack. It wouldn't hold the fire for long, maybe 10 minutes, but it bought her time. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were trembling, but she forced her fingers to work. She didn't dial 911. The police would take 8 minutes. She didn't have 8 minutes. She dialed the contact labeled The Gargoyle. Ronan answered on the first ring. "Tamsin? I thought you were in the library." "I messed up," Tamsin said. She was coughing, the smoke already seeping in. "I'm at the workshop. Vargas is here. They lit the building." There was a silence on the other end so profound it felt like the line had gone dead. Then, a sound Tamsin would never forget, the sound of a heavy oak desk being overturned, followed by the shattering of glass. "Where are you in the building?" Ronan asked. His voice wasn't human. It was a mechanical growl, devoid of fear, focused entirely on tactical retrieval. "Bathroom, center of the shop. Back door is chained, front is fully involved." "Get low," Ronan commanded. "Cover your mouth, do not hang up." "Ronan," she wheezed, sliding down the wall to the floor, clutching Stash's carrier with her free hand. "It's getting hot!" "I am coming!" he roared. "Put the phone away! Get low! I am coming!" She could hear the wind in the background. He wasn't in a car. He was moving. Chapter 28. The Wolf Unleashed. Ronan didn't take the SUV. The SUV had traffic laws. The SUV had limits. He had cleared the estate wall in a single bound. He hit the city streets running, his human skin shredding as he moved, his bones breaking and reforming in mid-stride. He didn't slow down for the pain. He welcomed it. By the time he hit the South Loop, he was no longer a man. He was a nightmare. A massive, midnight black wolf the size of a pony, his fur bristling with rage, his eyes burning like twin suns. He moved faster than cars, a blur of shadow and teeth cutting through the Saturday traffic. He smelled the smoke 3 blocks away. He smelled the accelerant. And underneath it all, he smelled her fear, sharp and acrid. Mate. Trapped. Burn. The workshop came into view. The front was an inferno. 3 men stood in the street, watching it burn, laughing. The wolf didn't bark. He didn't growl. He hit them like a freight train made of muscle and hate. He launched himself into the air, landing on the first enforcer with a force that cracked the pavement. Jaws snapped, a wet, terrible sound, and the man was thrown 20 feet into a parked car. The other 2 scrambled for weapons, but they were fighting a force of nature. The wolf moved with liquid lethality. A swipe of his claws tore through a leather jacket and the chest beneath it. A snap of his jaws broke an arm holding a gun. He didn't kill them, he broke them. He left them writhing in the street, neutralized, irrelevant. The building groaned. The roof was sagging. The wolf turned to the fire. His fur singed instantly in the heat. Instinct screamed at him to run from the flames. Fire was the one thing that could kill him. But she was inside. With a roar that shook the remaining glass out of the window frames, Ronan charged straight into the heart of the inferno. Chapter 29. The Aftermath. The bathroom door exploded inward. Tamsin screamed, curling over Stash's carrier, expecting the fire to finally consume her. Instead, a massive, dark shape filled the room. It was burning hot, radiating heat even greater than the fire, but it felt safe. The wolf loomed over her. His fur was smoking. His golden eyes were wild, frantic. He nudged her hard with his wet nose, whining low in his throat. "Ronan?" she choked out. He bit down on the back of her heavy canvas jacket, gently, careful not to graze her skin, and hauled her up. He blocked the flames with his own body, pressing her into his side. They moved. He guided her through the smoke, shielding her from the falling debris. When the roof beam came down, he didn't dodge. He took the hit across his massive shoulders, shuddering but refusing to buckle, holding the weight until she scrambled underneath. They burst out of the back wall. He slammed through the brickwork like it was cardboard and tumbled into the alleyway. Cool air, sirens in the distance. Tamsin rolled onto the asphalt, coughing, clutching the carrier. "We're out. Stash, we're out." She looked up. The wolf was standing over her. He was panting, his tongue lolling. His fur was scorched in patches. He looked terrifying, a monster from a horror movie, blood on his muzzle and fire in his eyes. He whined, backing away from her. He lowered his head, his ears flattening. He looked ashamed. He was waiting for her to scream, to run. He had shown her the beast in its truest form. Tamsin wiped soot from her eyes. She stood up, her legs shaking, and walked straight toward him. "Hey," she rasped. The wolf flinched, bracing for rejection. Tamsin fell to her knees in front of him. She reached out and buried her hands in the thick ruff of fur around his neck. She didn't care about the blood. She didn't care about the claws. "You came," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his massive snout. "You crazy, furry idiot, you came." She pulled back to look into his golden eyes. "Did you win?" she asked fiercely. The wolf blinked. A huff of air escaped his nose that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. He leaned his heavy head against her chest, letting out a long, rumbling sigh that vibrated through her ribs. Chapter 30. Epilogue. 1 year later. The library smelled of old paper, beeswax, and peace. The restoration was complete. The oak shelves gleamed with a deep satin finish. The rolling ladder glided silently on its track. It was, objectively, Tamsin's masterpiece. But her favorite spot wasn't the library. It was the back porch. She sat on the swing, her feet tucked under her, a glass of lemonade in her hand. The sun was setting over the estate, casting long shadows across the lawn, where Stash was currently burying a walnut in a prize-winning rosebush. The screen door creaked. Ronan stepped out. He looked different than the man she had met in the hotel room. The tension was gone from his shoulders. The storm in his eyes had cleared. He walked over and sat next to her, the swing groaning slightly under his weight. "He's digging up the roses again," Ronan noted, watching the squirrel. "He's gardening," Tamsin corrected. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "He's contributing to the household." Ronan chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. The bond hummed between them, a warm, golden tether that was always there, a constant reminder that she was never alone. "You know," Tamsin said, watching Stash pat the dirt down with his tiny paws, "I finally figured it out." "Figured what out?" "Why he liked you, that first night." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "Because of my animal magnetism?" "No," Tamsin laughed. "Because of the bite." "The bite?" Ronan looked at his thumb, where a tiny white scar was still barely visible. "He bit me because he hates me." "Nope," Tamsin grinned. "Stash never bites bad people. If a bad person tries to touch him, he runs. He only bites people he trusts. He does it to test their reflexes. If they don't drop him, they pass." Ronan stared at the squirrel. "He tested me?" "He approved you before I did," Tamsin said. "He knew you were safe. He knew you wouldn't hurt us." Ronan looked down at her. His eyes shifted, just for a second, a flash of gold in the twilight. He kissed the top of her head, pulling her closer. "He was right," Ronan murmured into her hair. "I'll always catch you, Tamsin." Tamsin smiled, closing her eyes as the sun dipped below the horizon. "I know," she whispered. "Now, about that invoice for the rosebush repair." Ronan groaned, resting his chin on her head. "Put it on my tab,"